Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. Last week I finished the last of 21 community forums across my electorate, from Kingscote in Kangaroo Island to Victor Harbour on the southern Fleurieu Peninsula and right up to Houghton and the Lobethal community at the other end of my electorate. Over the course of March, I heard from over 500 people at the forums of all ages and backgrounds, from school-age environmental campaigners to self-funded retirees. But despite their differences, they all wanted the same things: action on climate change, access to quality education and affordable health care, and a focus on regional infrastructure. We have many of South Australia's fastest growing communities in Mayo, being Mount Barker, Aldinga and the South Coast, and we need to ensure that our roads, schools and hospitals will meet the growing need of our regional communities. For the Kangaroo Island community, access to healthcare is indeed an urgent matter. The island's sole medical practice is based in Kingscote. It is difficult to secure an appointment with the GP due to the demand for services, and even the residents must also contend with travel costs and time spent travelling to and from Kingscote. And I'd just like to say Kingscote and Kangaroo Island as a community now no longer have any form of public transport across a very large island, which is deeply concerning. And that's why I'm calling on the federal government to provide seed funding for a trial of a GP outreach service based in Kingscote that could also travel to Pandana and Penneshaw, and indeed American River. Affordable access to high-quality healthcare is an issue felt keenly across my electorate, with a shortage of GPs resulting in the downgrading of emergency and after-hours services in a number of community hospitals. And that's why I'm calling on the government to make a significant investment in the Mount Barker Hospital Emergency Department. I do welcome the announcement of $8.6 million that was provided for the expansion of the emergency department. But many experts in the community believe that this is not enough. This is really just a band-aid solution. And based on the 7% population share of the nation, South Australia alone should have received $93 million of the government's proposed $1.3 billion community hospital program. So $15 million for a hospital infrastructure project that serves a local population catchment of well in excess of 80,000 people, and particularly as Mount Barker itself is set to grow to 55,000 people, is not only fair and reasonable, but one that will mean our community will receive the level of healthcare that they need and deserve. There is such a difference between whether you live in metropolitan South Australia and regional South Australia with respect to healthcare. We really are treated as second-class citizens. Dental care is often overlooked, but a fundamental aspect of healthcare. Unlike when you visit your GP, or even a trip to the hospital, the majority of costs of a trip to the dentist are funded by the patient, with Australians paying 58% of out-of-pocket costs of dental care compared to around 12% for a GP visit. Over 2 million people avoided or delayed going to the dentist because of the cost, and the situation is particularly challenging for those on low incomes like our aged pensioners. And that is why I'm committed to seeing the federal government fund and enable people on the aged pension to be able to claim up to $1,000 in a voucher system in any 2 years for dental, and that must be able to be delivered in their own local community. And that's why the voucher system that exists for up to 18 years of age, I believe, should also be there for aged pensioners. And this should be the first of many steps in creating affordable access to dental care for all Australians. The greatest policy failure of our current generation and of this parliament is our inability to move on climate change. No other policy issue has been plagued by such partisan attacks, and no other policy issue has heralded the repeated fall of Australian Prime Ministers. Mayo is already feeling the effects of a more volatile rainfall, with flash flooding becoming a regular occurrence. Our communities on the lower lakes and beyond know only too well the devastation caused by drought. However, the lack of large-scale government support for long-term environmental rehabilitation and future-proofing means we are doomed to see the same story of agricultural and environmental distress repeat itself. My coastal communities are increasingly concerned and affected by king tides, severe storms, coastal erosion and sea level rise. My coastal councils are desperate for assistance because this is the problem that local governments simply do not have the financial capacity or expertise to address. But, as often the case, the community has provided the leadership that is so sorely lacking by government. Community environmental NGOs provide hundreds of thousands of hours of dedicated volunteer labour and are a very cost-effective way of leveraging funding for maximum environmental benefit and effect. However, the federal government funding for these organisations has been irregular. It's been scattergun. It's been diminishing in its ability of our community environmental NGOs to maintain their capacity and provide consistent environmental assistance. A funding floor guarantee that capacity will be sustained and long-term community environmental projects can be started and finished. It is an important truism to state that education is critical to the future prosperity of our community. Education creates so many social benefits, including better employment outcomes, lower crime rates, improved civic engagement, reduced rates of drug addiction and healthier families. Transitioning young people from school into further education, whether that be vocational education, an apprenticeship, on-the-job training or indeed tertiary education, is a major predictor of their future success. And I know from my previous work in the youth sector and my regular meetings with local educators that we need urgent capital upgrades to the Mount Barker and Victor Harbour TAFE SA campuses. If we don't act now, the ageing TAFE facilities will significantly restrict the quantity and quality of courses they can offer our young people, impacting severely on their future. It is utterly ridiculous, Deputy Speaker, that in my community, where we have one of the fastest growing regions, being Mount Barker, young people cannot do any construction courses at the local TAFE course. I mean, it just beggars belief. If we want our young people to stay in our regions and in South Australia, then we need the major parties to invest in quality training. And that's why I'm calling on the government and the opposition to make an investment in more than $500,000 in Mayo's TAFEs. It's not a huge amount of money, but it will mean the world of difference. We must ensure that our public schools have the resources they need to meet the increase in demand. And that is why, as the education spokesman for Centre Alliance, I negotiated an extra $424 million for SA schools through the Gonski 2.0 education reforms, with an extra $66 million for Mayo schools. But we need more. Schools across my electorate, from the Eastern Fleurieu School in Strathalbyn to the Mount Barker South Primary School, are at capacity. Multiple classes being jammed into busy libraries or forced outside, even during heatwave conditions. This simply should not be happening in a modern country like Australia. And I'm committed to improving education outcomes for Mayo, and I will work with all levels of government to deliver fairer and stronger funding for our schools. And finally, as a regional and rural electorate, and with limited public transport options, it's imperative that our local roads are maintained. It is unacceptable that I have constituents saying that their cars are actually being damaged as a result of our local roads falling into disrepair, or that friends won't come and visit them because they need a four-wheel drive to do so, and that's when they're even 50 kilometres less than as the crow flies to the city. To account for this inequity, South Australia received for many years the supplementary road funding from the federal government. This funding recognised that South Australia had more than 11% of the nation's local road network, but received less than 5% of the national road funding. However, the previous Liberal government cut this funding in 2014. Centre Alliance then successfully fought for the reinstatement of the supplementary road funding in South Australia in 2017, but that funding is coming to an end. Once that funding was reinstated, South Australia's regional councils received an extra $40 million over 2 years to assist with maintaining our extensive local road network. This funding is due to expire at the end of this financial year, 30th of June 2019. And it is imperative that the government commit to extending this funding. It is fundamentally unfair that South Australia is left behind with respect to regional road infrastructure. And I will continue to work hard for a better deal for our regional and rural communities right across Mayo.